for you. So today we have with us Priscila Atkinson, who recently summered with the Constitutional Law Branch of the Ministry of the Attorney General. But before we begin, we want to invite you to share your comments and any questions you may have for future interviews. So welcome, Priscila. We are excited to have you here to share your insights on how to land a summer position with a government branch. So let's start with some background information.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to share all the information I know on how to secure a position with the government. I would just like to start with a disclaimer, letting everybody know that my opinions that I share here are my own and not the opinion of the Minister of the Attorney General.
Perfect. Awesome. So let's start with some background info. Tell us more about where you studied back home and your path once you moved to Canada.
So I studied in Brazil. I come from the northeast of Brazil, and it's a civil law jurisdiction. So it's a little bit different from the common law jurisdiction that we have here in Canada. I completed my 5-year LLB in 2017, and it was the valedictorian of my class. And right after I finished my LLB, I came to Canada, I think 6 months after, and I started to apply to OSGUD right away. So since I'm from civil law background, I'm forced to go back to school to obtain my NCA requirement, my certificate of qualification. And I decided to go to OSGUD Law School and complete the LLM at Canadian Common Law. I started the LLM in January of 2019, and I decided to do it part-time. So I would have more time to engage in clubs, and also I would be able to fit within the timeline of the JD students, including being able to apply for summer jobs. So I started in 2019, and I'm going to complete the LLM now in December of 2020.
Amazing. Awesome. Before I move on, I really liked what you said about joining clubs. Can you share more about that?
Sure. So one thing that I did during OSGUD was I wanted to make sure that I didn't just have my didn't just take an academic approach during the LLM and try to get the good marks, which are necessary to get a good summer position, but also try to join some activities that were of my interest, to have the extracurricular approach as well on my resume whenever I applied for positions, and also to get some Canadian experience, which might be difficult when you are a newcomer to a country. So I worked here at Pro Bono, Ontario. I volunteered there for almost a year. And it was a very interesting opportunity to do client intake and to understand how the procedure of the small claims court work. And I also mentored high school students through the Law in Action Fin School program. I was in a club of constitutional law, of the Runnymede Society. So I did a bit of everything that I wanted to, and that helped me a lot when I applied for positions, because they saw that I was able to multitask, and even though I had a lot going on in my life, I was still able to get good marks. So that's why I did it.
Amazing. I think that's very helpful for other students that are doing the OSGUD LLM to engage in other activities because they're essential when you're applying. Awesome. So tell us more about your application process. To where did you apply? How many applications you sent out? What were you targeting specifically?
So since I didn't have to apply for articling, because I made sure there was a part-time student and I could apply 1 year for summer, and then if I didn't get hired back, I would apply for articling. I had a lot of time to do my application. I applied through the VLAW portal, which is the portal that has all the applications available for 2L summer positions, for articling positions, also for clerkships. That's where all the students go for. And it opened, I believe, around June. And I checked which positions are available, but I started to prepare my material around mid-July, and it took me 1 month to have it all done. And I took it as a full-time job, and I know not everybody has a time, but I was lucky enough that I was on vacation from the university, and it was the summer, and I happen not to like the summer in Canada, so I was just staying indoors and working on my resumes, my cover letters, and I'm not sure the number of applications that I sent in the end. But I took a strategy that on the beginning, I did the cover letters for the places that I was not very interested into, even though I would like to work there. Like, it wasn't my top priority, because I used that as a practice on how to get my cover letter to the point that I was satisfied with. And still, like, it wasn't just meaningless practice. I could still use this material and apply to a position that maybe it would turn out to be an interview. And then after that, I moved on to do the applications for the big law firms, which I wasn't sure if I wanted to get into, but I was interested in a few of them. And I liked the practice, mostly the ones that were also based in Latin America. And then I moved on to them. And then I moved on to the government at last, because I felt like it was better for me, since I had a lot of time, to leave what I really wanted to the end, because I would have more practice and I would be more used to write the cover letters, and it would be easier to do so. And I'm very glad I did that, because I felt that as the time passed and when I was writing my cover letters, and my resumes, that didn't change much, but my cover letters, I did tailor them for each position. I found that it was more genuine. It was easier to show a story and to actually not just sound boring on the paper, but actually sound interesting and make them want to interview me. So in the end, I applied to almost every position available in law. It is not something that I think everybody should do. I did that because I honestly, I knew what I wanted, and I knew my top 20, which consisted of some big law firms, which happily I was called for in the OCIs, and some government positions. But I thought it was better to just keep all the options open. And honestly, as an internationally trained lawyer, and even as a law student in general, we need to be able to keep our mind open and to accept not whatever comes in our way, but whatever comes in our way that we feel comfortable in doing. So that's why I applied. I think I applied to around 60 positions in the end. I'm not sure, but it was a very big number.
Wow.
And another thing I remember on applications is that it was hard in the beginning to understand where to put my documents, because the documents are tailored for JD students. And then I recall that when I was submitting my transcripts from Brazil, because I thought it was better to do so since I studied there, it wouldn't make sense not to include that. I also put a chart from my home jurisdiction, from my university, explaining what my marks meant. And I think that is something that everybody should do. You shouldn't just put, let's say you're from India, and just put your marks from there, because Canada has no idea what 90% in India means. So you should make sure to include that chart. But aside of that, it was very simple. The Villa portal is very easy to use. It's very user-friendly. And I am not that tech savvy at all. So if I can figure it out, I think anybody can figure that out, and you'll be okay. Just make sure you don't leave for the last minute. That is the one tip. Don't leave for last minute, because you end up not being able to apply for everything.
Exactly. And tell us more about how Villa portal works. Let's say that you have an interest in specific firms. Do you just save them and then you can go back at any time to just apply to them?
So that is a dream. The dream is that the portal works well, and then you add your interest, and then when you open again, interests are saved. But unfortunately, no. I did learn that the worst way. I added, I think, around 15 places that were my top choices, and from a huge list. So the list doesn't come organized by areas. It just comes in alphabetical order. So you really have to look through every single position. And then what I did was I added my top 15 to the side to apply now whatever button it is available there. And then I went on to live with my life. And when I came back, it was no longer there. So it doesn't stay saved. You have to make sure you create a list on a Word document or something, and you write there what is your top choice and what you want to apply on the next day or the next week, because there is no feature on the website to just save anything.
That's a very good point. Yeah, create your Excel spreadsheet to know where you applied. Amazing. And okay, so you applied, and then what happened with respect to interviews? Because I know that the process is different for the government and for firms. So tell us more about that.
So I didn't really know what would happen after I applied. I thought everyone run OCIs. I thought OCI was the norm, and both government and small firms, whoever was there, I thought they would call me for the on-campus interviews. And when the on-campus interviews date approached, I got a call for the NCA interviews and also from Osgood. And I had secured 7 interviews in total, 6 through the NCA and 1 in Osgood. That was the online interview that I did. And I was very happy, but I was happy and thrilled, but at the same time so disappointed because I got no call from the government. I got no call from any law firms like in criminal litigation. Like I hadn't abandoned yet my desire for criminal law, and then I got not even a chance to talk to someone in the field. And I remember I spent about a week very disappointed of that. And then I decided to message a JD friend. And I was like, oh, did you get any government OCIs? And he's like, oh, no, they don't do OCIs. And I had no idea. So it's something to keep in mind that if you apply for government, big laws, or like everything that is on the website, usually the OCIs are reserved for big law firms. Like some government offices do OCIs. I know the Federal Prosecution's Office for Criminal does that. The Crown Law Office Criminal, sometimes they also do OCIs, but it's not a lot of them. And they don't do for NCA candidates usually. I'm not sure about this year how it's going to be, but usually they just call the NCAs for the Infirm stage. So yeah, just don't be disappointed and think you lost your chance because you didn't get calls for OCIs.
Amazing. That's very helpful for students to know what to expect. Okay, and then what happens on your call day when you don't know who to expect call from, especially if you apply to so many government positions?
So like on the OCI day, it was simple. Like I just got a call and they said you have 6 interviews, do you accept? And then I said, of course. And then I got a calendar of what to do. Like, and then I was supposed to come to the OBA building on a certain day. And I had those 6 interviews pretty much staggered one after another. And like, it was easy to navigate because I didn't have to make my schedule. And for the OCI, you don't have to worry about making a schedule or about receiving calls. Like, there is not a specific, right now, there is not a specific call date or call time. It might have in the future. That it's important to keep that in mind, but right now it's very organized already for you. You don't have just have to say, yes, I want the interviews. But the Infirm is a total different story.
Yes, and we will get there. So there is no specific day that you should expect calls to schedule the OCIs. Like there is a call day to schedule the Infirms.
There is not right now. It might have, like it depends on each intake. Last year there wasn't. Like I got a call when I didn't expect a call. But like Osgood, we had a date that we're supposed to expect an email from them. But it's not the same as it's not regulated by the Law Society. It's regulated by your university and regulated by now the ITLNCA networks. So you just have to make sure you know what you're applying for and you know the rules around the process that you're applying for.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you received OCIs through Osgood and through NCA. So let's start with the online one, because I feel like a lot of students are working on like uncharted territory now. So tell me more about how you scheduled your Zoom, whatever technology you were using, interview.
Yeah, so I did, well, it was online, but I still had to go to Osgood. I was still at Osgood building. Now you're going to be doing from home. So it was very similar to the in-person interviews. Like I did the in-persons first, and then the day after I did the online. And it didn't feel that different. Like, of course, you have to try to be a little bit more interesting, and you don't have to try to bring a bit more, like making it conversation less boring because it's on video. And we all know the Zoom fatigue is real. So if your interviews at the end of the day, you have to make sure you try to make the interview very memorable. So they can't forget they're tired about Zoom and can remember about you. But the content of the interview was similar, like the questions I got, they were similar. And I think the interviewers, they really tried their best to mimic the in-person experience. So I don't think the people doing the interviews right now will have a big disadvantage, mostly because everyone will be doing it online. So there will be, like, you have no disadvantage towards the JDs or other NCAs. But just make sure you have a professional background, like a white wall or don't have people, like tell your family, don't come in my room today. Just make sure you're alone and you look as professional as you can, but treat it as an in-person interview.
Great, that's awesome. And then what was the difference with the in-person OCIs?
The only difference, honestly, is that it was more tiring. So I feel like maybe I would prefer the online interviews because you wouldn't have to keep walking out and back into the booths. Like, then it was also very noisy in the in-person OCIs because it's like a lot of people together in one room and everybody trying to talk to the firms. So like it was similar in regards to the substantive questions, like the questions I was asked. They were pretty much about my personality. The law firms, they don't really focus on substantive questions. So of course they care if you have an interest in the field and if you know something about the field they work with. Like if you want to work with IP law and you took a course in IP law, they will be very interested in that. But they won't ask you about IP law. Like they won't make you feel like you're taking an exam, which is very different from the government. And we'll talk about it after. But they'll focus mostly on a personality to see if you are a great fit for that law firm. They're looking for the fit. They're looking to see, like, can I see this person working here during my summer, during the articling, and then as an associate? So, like, don't try to be someone else. Be yourself 100%. Like, I'm too extrovert. I'm extremely Brazilian, and that's what I was there. Like, I'm like, if I don't fit in the firm, it's because it's not meant to be. Like, I'm not going to mimic being someone else. I'm going to be myself 100%, like maybe even 110. And I also had some behavioral questions though, like, so keep in mind that it's not just about fun and about hobbies. You might also face some behavioral questions, so you should try to practice for that. But the in-person interviews were very similar, and like, it's not something to worry about. It's like a quick date. They're just trying to see if they want to date you further.
That's a perfect analogy. And tell me more about what questions they asked you with respect to why you want to work with their firm. Did you had you done your research before? How do you manage to respond to these questions without sounding generic?
Oh my God, I was so nervous about that question because I had so many, like, I felt like I had so many interviews and I was afraid that I would mix up the firms and I would tell, oh, I want to work here because of that. And then that was about another different firm. So I did take the time to study. I think we had 2 weeks to study last year. This year, I know it's going to be a bit tighter, the deadline. So maybe like try to take the weekend before the OCIs to research the firms. But I studied for a full week and I made a chart of the reasons that I wanted to go to the firm. Of course, I already had something before because I applied for them. So I did have an interest in them. But I went a bit further. I tried to look at the sectors that they work at. I always tried to see if they had practice in Latin America because that's something I was very interested in, to be able to work with M&A related to my country and to use my civil law background. So like the firms that I interviewed through the OCI, they were very similar though. Like they're all global law firms, so they're all big. Just one of them was a bit smaller. So like I just made sure that I had my interview done and that I had a cheat sheet. Like I created one small cheat sheet for each of the firms. And I had my questions that I wanted to ask them prepared beforehand. Like based on each firm, I had different questions because you can't just ask the same question to every firm. So I just made sure to do my work, like just do your work, but also don't be too stressed about forgetting things and saying something that you might think it's wrong. Just try to have fun. Because when you ask why do you want to work here, it's like if you really want, if you have an like if you're honestly interested in the firm, it's going to be an easy question to answer. You just have to try to sound genuine and like not worry too much, because if you sound like a robot, it's not the best, right?
Exactly. That's very useful. Tell me more about questions like behavioral questions. I know that they like to ask questions that people are eager to respond in a way that show them that they can disregard their personal life, the firm is the best, and they can just sacrifice their life for the firm. So did you have any questions that spoke to that?
Yes, I did. Most of my questions are related to personality on the interviews, but I did have one firm that really liked asking behavioral questions. And one of the questions I got was that I will never forget, because I was too honest. And after I was thinking, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have been too honest. So the question was, what would you do if you had the 2 deadlines that were like coming up together and you noticed that you couldn't finish the work? Like, what would you do? And then I was right away, I'm like, I would ask for help. Like I was so honest. I'm like, I would ask for help. I would tell that I needed someone else added to my team, maybe another summer student, maybe an associate. Like I just think I told them I thought it was important that the client got a good job done at the end. Like I didn't want to just rush and spend like nights awake and like not sleep and then give them a poor quality work done at the end. So yeah, like my answer was one simple, I would ask for help. And it looked like I received a good feedback right away. Like the interviewer was very happy that I was honest, because I feel like they're trying to find a fit for the firm. If you're giving them those prepared answers that every single candidate gives them, they know you're lying. they are prepared, like they work with that for years. So they know that you're telling, oh, I would like work on long hours, or oh, I would make sure that I'll go to bed at 6 and I'll wake up at 2 in the morning. Like maybe you would be honest and you would actually do that. But like it's better to just tell the first thing that comes to mind and just like tell the truth. If you are the person that would actually do that, then well, you tell them, right? Because you can't lie. But if you're not, and you're like me, like I would never do that. I like sleeping, so I would ask for help. And then I think that's important to keep in mind. And I did have other behavioral questions like, what did you do? Like if a client started to be very aggressive, or like, and then you would call your superior, like simple questions that it's like common sense that we know how to answer. But like they're not hard. I would just say practice behavioral questions in advance, even before you know that you have OCIs, even before you know that who is going to call you, because that is important no matter what.
That's great. Exactly. Well, I think you covered all topics that I wanted to touch on. So let's move on to your infirms. How many of your OCIs led to infirm interviews, and what happened with the government?
So out of my OCIs, just 1 out of the 7 led to the infirm, and I think that's mostly because of the fit that I talk about. Like I noticed during the interviews at the OCI that I wasn't going to be called by the firms. Like I noticed that it wasn't a good match. And that is a feeling that you can sense during the interview, and something that you should pay attention for, because you should make this mental mind, or like you should put in a paper, what is your priority? Like that is the firm I like the most, and that's the firm I like second. And what it's funny is that in the end, there was one firm that I loved, like I fell in love with them. And they also fell in love with me because it was the one firm that called me for the infirm stage. So like it was 1, but I was happy that it was 1. And then in the end, on the call date for the infirms, which was a Friday morning, I think at 8:00 in the morning, my phone was just like not stop ringing, and I was so stressed. I got I think it was 8 or 9 calls from the government, from different branches. That one firm that I already knew they were calling, and I got also 1 criminal law firm that called me. So in the end, I got around like 10 to 11 calls. And like, while this might sound to most like a success, that you should just be happy, that did make me very stressed out, because I didn't know how to schedule my interviews. I didn't know what to do, and it got so messy. Like my interview schedule was so crazy. And in the end, it was worse for me that I got so many calls. Like I wish that I got 5.
Okay, that's a good number for students to aim for. 5 is good. You can schedule them the entire 3 days. So how did you schedule those? Because you have interviews on Monday, on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, but the most important one are usually on Monday. So how did you schedule them?
So what happened was that I honestly didn't know the interviews I was going to get calls for. Like if you are interested in big law firms and you just apply to them, and you know, like you had, let's say 10 OCIs, you know the max number of calls you can get is 10, and most likely you won't get all of them calling you. But since my interest was huge in the government, and like I applied, my life in Brazil, like my background in Brazil was mostly working for the Brazilian government. I have 2 clerkships back home. So I expected to be called, but I had no idea how many calls I was going to get. I knew that the branch I ended up working at would call me, because they sent me an email telling me they were going to call me, and I was so happy they let me know that. But most of the other places, they just don't tell you. The government doesn't tell you they're going to call you. So what happened was at 8:00, the law firm from the OCI they were the first to call me. And I remember that they wanted a 3:00 slot. And I was like, sure. Like I was the first person to call. So I was like, sure, go ahead. Like take the slot you want. But then I started to get a lot of calls, and honestly from places that I was interested in, but they were not my priority. Like they were not my number 1 interest. But I also didn't know that I was going to get more calls after. So I started to schedule them without thinking. That's what happened. I didn't have a plan. I was completely lost. I was lucky enough, though, that the CLB where I ended up working at, they called me, I think, 2nd or 3rd, and I did put them for 10:00 on Monday, which is the spot you put your main choice, right? Your number 1 choice, or at least your number 2 choice. But then I started, like, there was another branch in the government that I really wanted to work at, that they called me, I think, after 6 calls, and they wanted to put me on Monday, but I didn't have Monday available anymore. So I put them on Tuesday. So I think, like, because I didn't know what to expect, I overreacted. I put interviews in places I shouldn't have put. I had to call after to cancel interviews because I got other calls that I wanted more. And I had to lose a chance in something else because I no longer could show up. Like on Monday at I think it was 12 o'clock, I put one branch of the government that I was happy I got a call, but then some other branch that I liked more called me and wanted the 12 o'clock on Monday. And I was like, sure, I'll do it. And then I had to call to cancel. So I think that my advice to people is keep in mind that you might get more calls than you're expecting, and try to save the morning on Monday slots for the places you want. Even if you don't know, let's say you want the Crown Office criminal so much, even if you don't know they're going to call you, save the 10 o'clock on Monday. Don't let anybody else take that spot, or at least try to save it. And when they call you, try to put them for that time. And if they can't, put them at the spot they want to be. That's the one thing I regret. There was one place I wanted a lot, and they wanted a place on Monday. And I wish I had just put them and called the other place that I had for that slot and cancel. So make sure you plan ahead, you know your priorities, and you try to schedule them for Monday. And then, but also if you can't, don't stress. Just do whatever you can. They are aware that we have a lot of interviews. The firms, they know that. They're not going to feel offended if you put them for Tuesday. If they called you at 8:25, they know 25 minutes have passed. So they don't feel offended. And one of my Tuesday interviews actually led for a Wednesday breakfast. So it was good in the end. But yeah, planning is not something that is in your hands. It's just, I can do as much as, give as much advice as I can. Plan ahead, have a list of priorities, try to save the morning of the Monday to your favorite. But in the end, you will see when it happens that it's so fast. And it's honestly, if you're lucky, it'll fall in your plans. But I would say 80% of the times people don't do the schedule as they wanted to.
Exactly. So tell me more about what happens with the government, because law firms usually, if they like you, they invite you for a second interview the next day. So if you have blocked your next day with other interviews, you have to plan for allowing some second interviews. Does the government work the same?
So no, the government doesn't have follow-ups. Just a few branches do, the criminal law branches, they do, the Crown Office criminal, and also the federal government and the criminal branch, they also have follow-ups. They have the federal one has a cocktail, and the Crown Office criminal, they have a breakfast on Wednesday. So I didn't know that, and I didn't plan for that. I just booked them, as I said, crazily. I didn't even save the time on the follow-up for the law firm that I interviewed on Monday, and then I had to cancel 2 interviews that I had on Tuesday, last minute, because of course I couldn't show up. So, but you should try to plan if you're interviewing firms to save the Tuesday for follow-ups, because they will happen. And it's longer, I think it's 1 hour, 1 hour and a half on Monday. And then on Tuesday, it tends to be an hour, maybe 30 minutes. It depends on the firm you're going to. And you also have to save the Tuesday night. Well, not right now, in the future, for cocktails. I don't know, maybe they will do a virtual cocktail. I have no idea what they're going to be doing. But keep in mind that maybe you will have something social on Tuesday night.
That's interesting, because indeed, students need to get some experience on how to network on virtual events and feel comfortable to email directly somewhere or text on the platform directly to someone they want to meet. But let's say that we go back to post-COVID era and students participate in person cocktail receptions. What's the goal in how do you navigate them?
I think I didn't fit very well the cocktail reception, and I think that's one of the reasons that I ended up in the government, because in the end I felt more comfortable in that environment than in the law firm environment. And you will feel that. You will feel where you fit. But the goal is for you to try to talk with as many people as you can, and to meet as many people as you can in areas that you want to work at in the firm afterwards, because they'll have a lot of lawyers available there. And you have to try to be strategic with who you talk with. Try not to talk to people that have interviewed before. Of course, go say hi. Don't be a stranger. Don't be impolite. Go say hi. It was nice to talk to you today. But move on and go to someone else. Try to tell your story. Have an elevator pitch for a minute to tell who you are, what you're doing there, what you want to do in the future. But try to listen to the person. And I think the thing that you have to try to get out of it is that you have to try to make people remember you. because I'm not sure how it happens, but I think after they talk, like the lawyers talk to the recruiters and tell like which students they like the most. Honestly, I don't know that how that happens, but the goal is try to be professional. Don't drink. Like make sure not to drink alcohol, or if you do, just drink like 1 cup, because there is nothing worse than getting drunk in a cocktail party when you're applying for an articling or summer position. And like just try to enjoy yourself and try to have fun, because that's what they want. They want people that fit in the firm. They want people that feel so well in a social environment. So just try to enjoy it as much as you can, because it does have the added pressure. But no.
That's great. Did you do they assign a host that kind of walks you through the cocktail reception and makes it easier to introduce to people?
So I don't know how it's in every single firm, because as I said, I just had one that was a law firm, big law. The other cocktail reception I had was very informal in a pub and was like, very fun, and there was no host. It was just like a crazy conversation with everybody. It was very different. It wasn't a cocktail party. It was like more like let's meet and grab a beer together. But in the one that I had a cocktail party, yes, I had a host, and the host, like, he would ask me like, who do you want to meet? Like which areas of the firm, like which lawyers you want. So I'll say, oh, I want someone from M&A, and then I want someone from mining, and like they would help you to find the people, because of course you don't have to know every single lawyer of the firm. Like we try to go and memorize people's faces and put them together with names, looking at the website, but we will forget that. Like we do, usually you have a host to help you with that. I'm not sure if every firm is like that though.
Okay, that's great. And what happens at 5 p.m. on the Wednesday, I think, that you are sitting and
the
waiting?
stress happens on 5 p.m. on the Wednesday. Holiday. Yeah, so it's the call day for offers. So you have the call day for setting up the interviews, which is the first time you're going to be stressed and overwhelmed. And then you have the call day after this 3 days of interviews to tell if you got the placement. So usually the firms call at 5 sharp, or 5:05 and 5:10 max. You should know if you got a position. That's what I was told. If it gets at 5:20 and you don't get a call, that's because you're not getting a summer job. Like everybody told me that, and then it was 5:20, 5:25, and I had no calls. And I was so disappointed, because like I studied so much for my government interviews. Like I tried so hard for them, because as I said, like they're like exams. And there was one of them, the one I got hired into, that I was like, oh my God, I felt like that was the best oral exam I ever did in my life. Like how they're not calling me. And then when it was, I think 5:40, I got one call from them. And then when I was in the call with them and they offered me the position, I got another call at 5:41, 5:42 from another branch of the government. That branch wasn't to offer an interview, was to tell that it was like the next line. They would ask me to apply to articling, etc., which I didn't do in the end. But like my message is like I got my job, my position at 5:45. Like at 5:10, my friends were commemorating. They were all happy that they had a position, and I had nothing. And at 5:45, I was feeling like a failure. I was feeling like I couldn't get a job anymore. And that I just not wasted, but like that I wasted a month of my life doing those interviews. And then I got the call and I got the position I wanted, my top position. So like my advice is like, keep in mind that the game is not over until it's actually over. Like, I don't know, there was a soccer player that used to say that, and I don't know his name. But like it's not over until after the 90 minutes plus the additional time. So keep in mind that when someone is given a position on 5 o'clock, they have 24 hours to think on it. So if that person doesn't know what they want of their lives and they have more than 2 or 3 options, they might hold those offers for 24 hours. And you might actually not listen to them until the next day. That is not usually what happens, because the firms, they don't pressure the students, but they remind them that there are other students that are anxious, that want positions. And normally the students tend to be nice to each other and make a decision, at least within a reasonable time. But it can also happen that you wait for an hour. Like I almost waited for an hour. So you have to keep in mind that it's not over. Like it is unlikely that you get a call after 5:40. Like most people get at 5. But it's not like, don't be upset and thinking that it's over. Don't do that.
That's a great reminder. So I want to take a step back, and you mentioned that this was your top choice. How did you feel during the interview, and did you have any hints that they would call you? They really liked you too?
So during the government, it's very hard to have hints. It's because what you guys are going to notice is that for most government interviews, the interview is very substantive, like extremely substantive. It's going to feel like you are in a law school exam, or even worse, it's going to feel like you are being like on a trial and like they're like just bombarding you with questions. So it's like an oral exam, literally. Like usually you pick a case law, either a case law that they assign to you or a case law that you like, and you're supposed to talk about it. And also they expect you to tell why you agree or why you disagree with the case, and also to know the content behind it. So in the constitutional law branch, for example, I picked a case that was related to charter rights. So I had to know it. I had to know what charter values were. I had to know freedom of religion because that's what my case was related to. In the criminal branch that I had, they assigned me a case that was related to causation. So I had to know the case law that was related to that subject. So you have to keep in mind that because since the government is very substantive, having more than 3 interviews of the government can be very stressful because it's like preparing for more than 3 exams in 1 week. So when I was doing the interviews, most of the time, they were not looking at me. They were looking at a paper because they have to be very objective with the grading criteria. It's not like law firms. It's not about the fit. Sure, the fit they do take in consideration if you fit or not in the law firm in the government. And maybe in the end, if they have 2 people of the same mark, they will pick the one that not that they like more, but that they think will be better for that specific branch. But what counts more is your mark. So it's like you have to make sure that you are clear in your answers, that you don't speak too fast, which is a problem for me, but I really try to control myself. So they can take notes because they literally transcribe word by word everything you're saying. So they can go back after and then they can compare and they can mark those exams. So it's hard for you to know like if it's going well. I remember though that at those 2 interviews, the Crown Office Criminal and the CLB, that I really enjoyed the interviews. That was something that gave me a hint. Like other government branches that I did the interview, I laughed and I was like, oh my God, that was like such a failure. Like, what am I doing here? They should just have told me you're not getting the position right away. Like they were bad. Like I knew they were bad. But the one that got picked at and the other one that I really liked, like I was having fun. So that's something I can tell, like for whoever is doing the government interview. If you're doing the interview and you feel like you're enjoying it, if you feel like things are coming your way and you can actually think on your feet and you're not thinking too long and you can answer whatever questions they're given to you, it's mostly because you're doing well. It's mostly because you're going to do okay. Like if you feel like you don't know what to reply, or if you're trying to make up answers that make no sense, then it's probably not going well. So that is the way for government interviews. Like it's not like if the person is smiling at you or being nice to you, whatever, because they can't be nice to you. They're looking at a piece of paper. More about like whether you're enjoying it, whether it's a fun interview to have. And the one I got hired at my first choice, CLB, like I loved the interview. It was like, I think it was 30 minutes and we're talking about that case. And they would be asking me a lot of questions about the case. And like in the end, I didn't notice that 30 minutes had passed. And it was just a very interesting experience. Also, something else to keep in mind about governments is that they also have behavioral questions, a lot of behavioral questions, way more than law firms, because they want to make sure that you're ethical, that you know what you're supposed to do, and that they don't have to teach you those simple stuff. But yeah, like just try to enjoy. And if you're enjoying, it's because it's good.
Okay, that's very helpful. Some government departments have asked you to show up at the interview 20 minutes to a half an hour before the interview, and they give you an additional some questions that you're supposed to prepare while you are waiting to get in, and then you're supposed to keep some notes if you want to. Did that happen with you?
Yes. So each government branch is different. Like the law firms you're going to find they're very similar, that they're all trying to look for the fit. The government offices, they're going to do their exam based on how their office operates. So if the office, like if people in the office usually talk about case law day long and keep discussing about every single piece of legislation that comes out, like CLB, they will do an interview where you pick a case and then discuss about it, because they want to make sure that you will feel comfortable when you join the branch. And that's what all people do 24/7. But there are other branches that want to know how you are in research or how you are in putting your ideas together within a tight deadline. So there was one of the government branches that I interviewed with that I was asked to arrive, I think it was 20 minutes in advance. And they gave me 5 questions that I had to prepare. And then after I had to read my answer to them. So that was one of the interviews that I liked the least, because I do work well under pressure, but I prefer having time to work my ideas through and like having more personable interaction with someone. So that's also a way that the government finds to find the fit for the office. Because even though they're a government branch, they still have a way that the office operates. But that is indeed possible. They will let you know. It's not like you're going to arrive there and like, oh, here's an exam for you to answer. You will know that you have that exam to answer, but you won't know the questions until you arrive. Other offices, there was one that I didn't end up interviewing at, I had to cancel, but they sent me the questions a day in advance. It was like the same style that I would type and then I would read to them whatever I wrote, but I had 1 day to prepare, which I ended up not preparing. But it's good to know that that's a possibility of something that can happen to you.
Okay. That's great. I think we covered all the points. Now, if you want to share some things, some final thoughts on and a bit of your experience with the government, because you just completed your summer position. So how was it? What files you were working on? Who were you working with? How many students were there?
So my branch is a very small branch. I call it like it's a small family, the CLB family. So we just have 3 students, which is not a lot. Like usually firms have like 15, 16, and there's some government branches that have 10 students. So it's just 3, which is good because then you can create a good relationship with them. And I think that during the summer, the most important thing is for you to try to become friends with the other summer students, because they will be there with you during the summer, and most likely they'll be there with you during art claim, because it's usual for people to be called back, like hired back for art claim. So my summer was was a very interesting experience, was much more enjoyable than I expected. I was a bit scared because it was all remote. I didn't have the chance to work in person because of COVID. So I joined the office in May through a remote team session. And I was very scared that I wouldn't be able to find a connection with the lawyers, that I wouldn't be able to meet them, or that it would just like, they would just not like me because it's through like a camera. But in the end, I found that they were very open to try to mimic the most they can the in-person environment. I created great friendships with a few lawyers. Like I tried to be as involved as possible. I joined a few committees. I joined the diversity committee, the social committees, because I love to plan a party. And I also joined the education committees. So I try to be involved in the social aspect at the office, even though it's a government office, they still have committees. They still have things that you can volunteer for. And I also tried to get a wide array of cases, like it was of constitutional litigation. So I wanted to try to get different parts, charter sections, and also try to work with federalism as well. So I could have also Ontario Human Rights, the Human Rights Tribunal. So I tried to get a little bit of everything, but you have to keep in mind that the summer job is just 4 months. You don't, or law firms, I think it's like 2 or 2.5 or 3, like something of a charter. So you don't have a lot of time to experience fully the cases. That's something that I noticed. I couldn't see the case from the beginning to the end. I was kind of throwing like a few research tasks in the middle, and then like I didn't fully understand how the full cases was happening. I did have the chance to write a fact-in. I had the chance to do in-depth research that was supposed to be shared to the whole office. I had to do the chance to do more like isolated research, like one question that the lawyer needed to answer like quickly. I worked on some COVID-19 files. I worked with freedom of expression. I worked with freedom of religion. So like I had the chance to explore a lot of constitutional litigation issues. I could also attend to some online hearings. Like I attended online hearings, and also I was always at the meetings with the lawyers. That I'm not sure how law firms do that, but the government, when you're in the team, when they have a meeting, like whatever meeting they're having, they add the summer students, so we can have the experience of also seeing how the lawyers talk to each other, and like just watch and experience that, to like watch and learn. So I can't talk more about the cases I was in because of confidentiality, but like I did get the chance to experience a lot of different stuff. And I think that's what you should try during your summer. You should try to be at different practice groups. You should try to not just, you want litigation, but try not just to experience litigation. go also to do something else, some like consultant work, whatever the firm has. The research, try to accept, I don't know how it works, but there they give us the work and we decide between ourselves who is going to take that job. So try to pick the job that you haven't done yet. So if you have done a BOA, don't do another BOA, go do a research. Like if you have done a research on the US, like which I did, don't do another research on the US. Let someone else do that and go like do like a more, I don't know, a research that is related to legislation. Like try to diversify what you're doing. So when you come back for articling, you kind of have an idea of what people do at the office and you are ready to just already start doing the job, like in a more intense way, I would say. So I feel like summer is more prep school for articling, and you shouldn't try to learn everything. You shouldn't try to be perfect, but you should try to learn a bit of everything that the office does.
Amazing. And then how does the branch work? Are they inviting you directly to join them as an articling student, or do you have to reapply at the end for articling?
It depends. Each government branch has their own rules, so it depends on what they want to do. Most of the branches, they invite you back. They do have certain timelines they have to follow that are guided by the Law Society, but they do send you an intent to call you back, and then you can either accept that intent or you can keep it open until articling interviews. Most people, they don't, because usually you are in a position that you want to stay at. But like usually they invite back. I have heard though of government branches that they didn't hire back their summer students, not because they didn't like them, but because their procedure is to ask everybody to apply again. But of course, if you already summer there, you have a huge advantage. You know everyone. You already have the networking. They know who you are. They know how you work. They don't have to get used to you again. So it is a big advantage to summer, even if your government office decides not to hire you back like right away.
Amazing. That's great. That's very informative. Thank you so much. Before we close, do you have any advice for students that are going now in the process?
I think that the first advice would be prepare your applications in advance. Make sure that you tailor your cover letter for each firm, because if you do a general cover letter and you don't show your real interest in a particular firm or government branch, they will notice that. And try to make it short. Try to make the cover letter short, as short as you can. Of course, we have a lot to say about ourselves, but pick 2 or 3 features of yourself that you think stands out the most, that makes you be unique, and just use them. And another tip is that when you're writing the cover letter, each paragraph should be about something different. So don't write about 3 things in one paragraph and then write about 2 other things in the other paragraph. And like make sure why you love the branches in the first, and then second, like what is the skill you were bringing, or like just make sure it's separate and don't put too much, because they have thousands of applications. They have so many things to read through. So they have what you want, your goal is to make sure they remember you, that they read 500 applications and they remember, oh, there was that Brazilian that wrote about that, and that's why she wants to be here. Let's interview her. So it's not about being perfect, and also it's not about sounding classy. So use simple language. Make their brain get a rest when they're reading your cover letter. Make them enjoy reading your cover letter, and make them feel like you're almost telling them a story. So that is my first tip. My other tip is like make sure to have a list of what you must apply, so you don't run with the problem of not applying to that specific position if you don't have a lot of time. The other tip would be try to be open to other opportunities that you might not have as your first opportunity. But like if you want to work for the government, maybe think like, is there a law firm that you would enjoy working at? Like I'm pretty sure there are. You can just hate law firms as a whole. Like I'm pretty sure there is 1 or 2 that you would enjoy. Or the opposite, the same. If you want to, like you're a Bay Street person, you really want to go to Bay Street, maybe a good place to start your career would also be the government. So see if there is one branch in the government that would make transitioning into litigation-based rate to be good. So just try to keep an open mind and prepare for interviews. Get to know who you are, because they'll ask, tell me about yourself, and have this elevator pitch of like around 30 seconds of who you are. And know your hobbies from inside out, like know your hobbies very, very well. And then just be yourself. Like don't try to be someone else. Don't, because if you get hired being someone else, they will discover you are someone else and you will not stay there forever. Like your plan will be destroyed. You can just fake for so long. So those are my quick tips.
That's amazing. That is incredible. Thank you so much. And have a great day.